following program is a production of the Fairfax Network, Fairfax County Public Schools.
This program was made possible through generous support from the Donald W. Reynolds Foundation to George Washington's Mount Vernon Estate Museum and Gardens. Hear My Story, The Enslaved Community at Mount Vernon is a co-production of the Fairfax Network and George Washington's Mount Vernon Estate Museum and Gardens.
Please join me in welcoming our guest this evening. We join them in the year 1792. Billy Lee served as General Washington's manservant throughout the Revolutionary War and now oversees a shoemaker's shop in Mount Vernon. Onie Judd is a maid for Mrs. Washington. She travels extensively with Mrs. Washington, particularly to the presidential home in Philadelphia. Bob Hemings is with us tonight. He has come here, journeyed to Mount Vernon to be with Mr. Jefferson as he calls on General Washington. And Caroline is a maid here at Mount Vernon and works directly for Mrs. Washington when she is here. Christopher Shields currently serves as the General Washington's manservant. I'm going to start with you, Billy. How close really are you to Mr. Washington?
The general?
The general, yes. And you're not his manservant right now. I understand Mr. Shields is.
No, I brought up Christopher in that vocation at this time. However, the general and I, you could say we're as close as two legs walking around, you know? I've been with the general from the time, well, I was a young boy. We go to Philadelphia together. I laid out his uniform and when they was going to give him the commission to be the general.
Did you travel with him during the war?
Oh, yes, ma'am, I did.
Like, how many hours a day were you with him, for example?
Well, madam, I'm a body servant. Well, I was a body servant. And as a body servant, you tend to his body every day, all day, madam. So you could say as I knows him just as well as his wife, Mrs. Washington, knows him.
So you heard some of the conversations that went into forming the Constitution, for example.
Oh, yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. I gave my point, too, as well. Oh, yes, I did.
We want to hear about that in just a moment. Now, Onie, could you tell me, how often are you with Mrs. Washington, and how close are you to her?
Oh, well, I'm kept underfoot. I've waited upon her. Caroline does tend to her mostly, but I've learned what it takes to wait to her. I'm also her needlewoman and a seamstress. You see, Mrs. Washington loves the Queen's nightcaps, and you've seen her in them, have you not? Well, it takes a lot to present her in that way, so I help in that regard, and I've traveled with her as well, first to New York, then to Philadelphia with the presidency.
You feel like you know some of her innermost secrets?
Oh, well, you can't help but know. If you are that close to someone, you do know them. You do know them quite well.
Does she ever ask you advice on anything?
Oh, I wouldn't say anything like that. But I'm around just as much as, the young ones that are to the home there, her young ones, her grandchildren. So just sometimes proximity will give you familiarity with someone. Nice. But you are quite aware of your place.
All right. And Mr. Bob Hemings, how close are you with Mr. Jefferson?
Oh, well, Master Tom, I've served Master Tom as his personal valet, body servant, if you will. I've served him since 75, before the late war. Traveling with him, Philadelphia, New York, Boston, and the like, wherever he goes, to dress him, to shave him, to prepare his horses, tend to his horses, the like. He is awful fond of his horses, if you may understand that.
Not as fond as the general, you know that, don't you?
So, does he ask your advice on anything? Does he bring you into the conversations?
Oh, well, now, Master Tom will have some, well, you must understand, there's me and Master Tom when we by ourselves, and there's me and Master Tom when we with everybody else. Now, when we with everybody else, well, then it is what people see. The nature of how masters and servants, they interact with one another, but when we're by ourselves,
what happens?
We do have some talks. we have some awful interesting talks, in truth.
Do you give him your opinion on issues?
Oh, I've given him opinions on a whole mess of things. Now, whether he uses them or not, that is to his discretion.
All right, thank you. And Caroline, you're a maid for Mrs. Washington here at Mount Vernon. How well do you say that you would know Mrs. Washington?
Well, I've worked for Mrs. Washington since I was about 11 years of age, ma'am. So I think, and I'm not revealing my age now, but that's been quite a long time. Of course, Onie was with her during the presidency here because I was with child and I couldn't go up. I've got 5 children now. I think that's quite enough. But I would say I know her very well. I know her likes, her dislikes.
Her temperament?
Her temperament, yes.
All right, thank you. And Mr. Shields, now you are currently the General's manservant.
I am his right-hand man, yes.
And how close would you say that you are with him?
Well, very close, of course. I was hand-chosen by the General to be his manservant after Billy retired. And I think he chose me because of the trust that he had built up with me. He had sent me to Philadelphia. You see, I was bitten by a dog, and because of the disease that he was afraid that I might get.
How old were you?
Oh, I was about maybe 30, tobacco seasons. And he sent me to Philadelphia to get cured, and he gave me monies to pay the doctor, and which I did. And when I finished, of course, and came back, I gave him the chains back to him. So I think that in itself was trusting, and I felt he trusted me. And I believe that led to me now being chosen to be his manservant. Now, I know every frog is going to praise his own lily pad. And I've learned a lot from Billy, but sometimes we don't see eye to eye on certain things here. But I still regard him highly for what he's done in his lifetime with the General, yes.
So we know that the American Revolution is over, and the Constitution has been ratified. Let's go back to that issue of 3/5 of a person. Billy, being as close to the General as you were for so many years, what is that about?
Well, madam, you have to understand, I'm what you call a man about.
A man about?
A man about this and a man about that. Now, here's what I reckon for that, because you see, some things happen in due season, you see? Why, when we were doing the war, getting routed by the British, from Massachusetts on down to New York and had to cross the river there in New Jersey. Well, things was looking bad, you see. But things changed. So this here 3/5 thing, you see, it's a lot of folks down here in the South and many folks up north. So the gentlemen, they come up with this arrangement to say, we'll count all the Negroes in the South as not a full. Because if we did, the South would take over the North. The Northerners, they don't work that, let me tell you.
Oh, this was when they were looking to count the number of people a representative would represent in Congress.
But you understand, just because they might count me as a less than a person, don't mean that that's what I am, you see. You see me walking and breathing, you don't see 3/4 of me, do you? Right. You see the whole me. So that's just something for figuring, madam. That's all.
For taxation purposes.
That's figuring. That's all it's for, madam.
I still don't understand this 3/5 of a person. I mean, how could he even come up with that figure? I mean, as I told Billy, his horse is not just 3/5 of a horse. It's a whole horse. Even horses get counted as whole animals, so we can't be counted as whole people. So I'm not comfortable at all with this idea of 3/5 here. And as a matter of fact, I think it's a bit demeaning.
We've come to understand what it means, ma'am, that it is for representation and taxation and all them sorts of things. But just because we understand what it means doesn't mean that our opinions on it have changed and think that it's any more right. They are still using it to their advantage. These men would own slaves at the expense of us. Their advantage makes us less than humans, and you can't shake that.
And it appears to me that you assumed, maybe rightfully so, that once the Constitution was ratified and the words in the preamble says that all men are created equal, that you might find your freedom. Am I correct in assuming that? That's what you thought?
Well, no, it's just understanding what the words mean. All men are created equal. That's a fact. And I don't think anyone around
And women.
refutes that fact.
And
Now,
women.
Now, and when you say women, now let's understand now, when we say men, when you look in the scriptures, for the most part, the scriptures talk about men, but they ain't talking about just males. They talk about men and women. But when they say that all men are created equal, now that's truth. The good books say that. Everybody knows that. That's not the query. The query is how all men to be treated. And therein is the question.
I believe the question is unalienable rights. Now, I asked the preacher, what do that mean? That unalienable right mean? Well, I was told that it's mean God-given right. Not something right a man can give you. It's something that's created or given by God. Natural right, nature's laws, not natural laws. I believe I am a creation of God. So therefore, I believe that I am part of that unalienable right, equal.
Now, is it more important to you to be equal or to have your freedom? Are those separate issues?
You have to have both, ma'am. I mean, for even free Negroes now are not treated the same in the eyes of the law. As a matter of fact, many of the laws that pertain to us as property also pertain to those Negroes or mulattoes or Indians who are free. You must have both, ma'am.
Well, what is freedom? What is freedom?
What do you consider freedom to be?
Well, I can come and go if I like. If I want to make my way to Alexandria, I can do such. If I need a morsel to eat, I can do such. If I want to go out and talk to the trees, that's free to me. But when you nation building, which we did, we fought a war and we had to build a nation. Well, everybody in God's eyesight got 2 legs, 2 eyes. Everybody can't be equal.
Well, Mr. Hemings, what do you consider freedom to be?
Well, freedom. And I agree with Billy, what Billy is saying, but freedom, freedom begins with your reasoning, with your thought. It goes back to the whole age of enlightenment, of reasoning, of men understanding their place within the nature of all that's around them. So to be free is more at times than just merely being able to walk around and to do as you wish. But it begins with your ability to be able to think, to be able to acquire knowledge so that you can freely dispense and do among all of the things that you desire to do. You understand my meaning, do you not? Again, you have to understand and have knowledge and understand the things that have happened before you can understand where you are now, before you can understand what you are to do.
I'd like to take this moment to introduce our audience. We have teachers and students who are joining us in the year 1792 from West Springfield High School locally, and Northwestern, and Bladensburg High School. And we'd like to take any questions that our audience may have for our guests, now or whenever you're ready. In the meantime, have any of you ran or tried to get your freedom?
I thought about it. Of course, you always think about this, but you also think about the consequences. Or what's going to happen if you run, where you're going to go. I mean, you can't go north. The slavery started up there. Can't go south. Slavery in great numbers down there. The west, well, Indians out there, you know. You don't know what they are, friendly or not friendly. They've been given even some ready money to turn in slaves that have run away. So you don't know who to trust. So, but it's something you always think about. You always keep in the back of your mind.
I did think of it, yes. When I was about 17 years of age, there was a sloop of war, a British sloop of war that came here to the wharf. And it docked here. And I don't know if y'all know, but the British offered freedom to any Negro that escaped and went with them. And this ship came, and the captain was Captain Graves, I believe his name was. And about 16 slaves did run away on that ship that came here to Mount Vernon. And I was a lady's maid at the time, and I did give it some thought. But like you said, you don't know who to trust, because they might say they'll give you freedom and they could sell you off, you know, for their own personal gain. So I stayed I think it's better to stay with the people you know and the family you know. And
Under your own vine and fig tree, as the general would say. You make freedom where you are.
Do we have any questions in the audience? Yes. What's your name?
Hello, my name is Nicole, and I'm from Northwestern High School. My question is for Mr. Billy Lee. To extend more on Kate's question, when did you first meet the general, and what it was like your daily procedure at his house?
Well, I believe it go back to the mid of the 17s. The general, he purchased me from the Lee family down in Westmoreland, you see. And the general, he had just come back from being out in the frontier and was setting up his family and his household here, and he needed a good body servant. We Lees are cut from good stock, you see. And I was born to being a manservant. You need to know how to comb the hair back properly and cue it. You need to know how to deport yourself in a rather, in many places, you see. And I was a stout young fella. I could ride a horse, while no one could ride a horse in the whole of Virginia like me and the general. So he needed somebody who could keep up with him, and that was me.
All right. We have another question?
Hi, my name is Shelby. I'm from West Springfield High School. My question is to all of you for the fact that you all seem to have such great access to information. Do you share the news you get with Monticello and Mount Vernon?
Thank you.
If I will, you do share, but you don't share everything with everybody. Of course, in truth, if there was some sort of knowledge that I was to acquire, that there was some grand rebellion that was to be made, would I desire to pass that on to everyone? Or would I be the one to have to live day to day knowing that there are those who have died, who have been killed because of information that I've given them? So there are some things that you do say, but there's some things that I choose not to.
I've heard it said that General Washington envied the ability of the black community to communicate quickly. Do you think that that's a good point?
Well, absolutely. I mean, as he realized, a Negro is able to communicate. In fact, he said, what's in New York could be in Virginia the 4th night. But they don't know how we move the news. You know, there's various means of moving the news. And one of them is singing the news. Singing sun up to sundown, masters come upon their porch, say, oh, my Negroes must be happy. No. Most of the time they're singing about him, he has no idea, you know. It's all done in code. It's a way of surviving. You learn to pass the news. The news in the city will be on the plantation, and you can hear that news going from plantation to plantation to plantation. It used to be the drum. The drum used to be the way to communicate, but of course they figured that one out. But now the singing is allowed, so we use the singing to pass on the codes, the messages, the news that's in town.
And you have to remember that we are places where most people, Negro or white, can't go. We are in the homes, not only in the homes, but at the dining room table of these folks, in the taverns, in the businesses, in the shops. If you go to market to purchase, you are likely purchasing from Negroes there, and even the ships. So we have the advantage of being in a place to hear this information that a lot of folks, Negro or otherwise, don't know.
Onie, now you make it plain. We everywhere.
You're right, Billy.
We have another question.
My name is Cody Thomas from Northwestern. To Bob Hemings, you said you came to Mount Vernon with Thomas Jefferson. Some people say the general and Mr. Jefferson don't always agree. Did Mr. Jefferson tell you why he wants General Washington to take a second term?
It seems that Master Tom wanted Washington, President, the General, to take another term. The new republic, for things to become more to the ideal on the principles that men have been talking about, the best way to have things happen that way is to continue the presidency under the general. He understood these principles. He understood all of the workings and the differings that are being established between those to the north and those to the south, greatly respected, perhaps more than any other man. I see, and I would agree. I see no other that would be more fitting to serve in a second term than President Washington.
Well said, well said.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
All right. Do you have any other questions? Okay, all right. Now, I just want to mention, Mr. Heming, of course, your sister is Sally Heming, and I understand she has a very close relationship with Mr. Jefferson. Is that cool with you?
You mean cool with me?
I mean, excuse me, do you approve of that?
Well, no.
All right.
Certainly not. And in truth, to be short, you think of, for ladies, for women, you have a brother. Does your brother approve of the man that you go to see? Perhaps not. I do not approve of Master Tom to be a suitable suitor to my sister. For where are they going to go where he will be able to take care of her as a proper suitor would be able to?
So you and your sister are obviously very close to Mr. Jefferson. Yeah, very, very close. Thank you. Do we have another question?
My name is John from West Springfield. This is for Mr. Shields. Mr. Shields, do you think that the president or the general would listen to the advice of Mr. Jefferson and run for a second term?
John, I don't know. The general is quite tired. I mean, sometimes he's just barely is able to sit down in his chair. I'm there all the time, even at night time, to try to rub him down. I mean, he's been through wars. He's been through now a first term, and I think he would probably be persuaded by Mr. Jefferson, but I don't think it's a good thing for him. I think from his own body, you can just tell the way he moves now. He's not moving like he used to, and seemed to be able to get colds and other things happening to him that he used to overcome quickly. So I do feel that he shouldn't, but of course that's up to him.
Thank you.
Of course, in truth, if he doesn't, we all should be greatly concerned as to what the state of the nation will be.
See, I know the general, for country and for kin. Now, why he'd like to be here at Mount Vernon, because plain truth, the general and I, we soldiers. And after being soldiers, we plain farming men. General, he'd rather be here going out riding, and I'd be with him if I could get around and such.
Billy, you said that you gave him, the general, an earful on occasion.
Indeed.
Did you ask him about this 3/5 of a person and why the black community has not been freed with the ratification of the Constitution?
Well, you know, I've had the pleasure of sitting in the general's company in a private setting for he and I to exchange words. When I put to him about freedom, the general always says to me that the country that we live in has to make it so that a private man can handle matters privately himself. A master needs to be able to free their slave, should they be so inclined to do so. You don't have to go and make everybody do what you want to do, but you need to have the road open so a private citizen can carry forth the business that they wish to carry forth. Now, as I said before, I don't get too caught up in you see me as a 3/4 of a person. As I'm a whole man, as I said before. But I do understand that we fought the British over something more than just taxes. We fought the British so that we could make our own minds in a way where no matter if you was the lowest of the low, with hard work and using your wit about you, you could be something. I believe in that, madam. I do believe in that. And I believe that what makes us special.
Well, Onie, you mentioned you had 5 children.
Caroline.
Excuse me, Caroline, you had 5 children.
I did.
And do you think about, of course, your children and your grandchildren and your great-grandchildren? Have you talked with members in your community about what happens to them? Are they going to be slaves also? Enslaved members of that your community?
Well, yes, I think a lot about that because to look in their eyes and know that someone else is going to tell them what to do with themselves for the rest of their life. They don't have the, I mean, you speak of making a nation where people can become who they want to become. Well, my children can't become who they want to become. Someone will tell them what to become. I was told to be a lady's maid. I don't even like sewing, you know, and I certainly don't, you know, but I hope that with these words that have been written down, they carry a great deal of meaning, and I hope that they'll be acted out in time. They say that these abolitionists down in Alexandria City, these Quakers, you know the Quakers? Mm-hmm. Well, they say that in time, maybe even in 10 years' time, here in Virginia, we could see freedom, and I hope that that happens. You know, it's happening around the country. We see states have decided new laws that free the Negroes. I don't know if it'll happen here in Virginia, but I hope it will.
Onie, do you have faith that it'll happen?
I don't know. I think these men that own slaves in large number will be hard-pressed to do without. I mean, that's where many of them attain most of their wealth, a great majority of their wealth. And the way the law is, any Negro mother, like Caroline, when she has children, they become the property of her master. Mm-hmm. So you gain this property, you don't have to spend for it at all. Just with natural increase alone, you can keep and hold slaves in great number. I don't think that any of them will be persuaded to do away with that system. There may be a few, and I did hear about some, like Dr. Rush to Philadelphia, Mr. Lay a little bit before him, who strongly opposed the abolition, not just of the trade, but of slavery itself. But I don't know, ma'am.
All right. We have another question.
Hello, my name is Lulu from Northwestern High School, and my question is to Miss Onie. You mentioned the rebellion in St. Dominique's. Now, how did you come to learn about it?
Oh, well, you hear about a lot of things being in the household that I am in. When you wait upon Mrs. Washington, wife of the president, you have people coming into the home at all times. And also being in New York and being to Philadelphia, and while we are out at Mount Vernon as well, you have access to papers from all over the country. And in papers, say in New York, you have stories from all over the world. And that's one way to hear about things. At market, like I said, most of the time when you go to market to purchase, you're purchasing from other Negroes. You hear things that way. And those folks that are bringing in goods, not from market, but by way of transport on the water, that's where you hear a great deal, many things too. Carters will transport goods for their master so they can bring goods back and forth, and when they're bringing goods, you can best believe they're bringing news. So there is much news that travels very quickly amongst all of us.
Well, I heard about it right here in Virginia as well, because many people were escaping with their slaves from, many of the Frenchmen down in Saint Domingue were escaping, trying to get out of the conflict down there, and they brought their slaves here. And so we had some people that were French that came, and they spoke of where they came from and how they got here and what was going on down there.
And being 1792 as it is, the French Revolution has just begun, and the revolution also in Haiti. So this year seems to be a very tumultuous year around the world.
Freedom all around, madam.
I believe the French want their Declaration of Independence. Just like we have our Declaration of Independence, I think the French want their Declaration of Independence. I think they deserve so.
That's true.
I mean, if it wasn't for the French, we would not have won the War of Independence.
Indeed.
So I think we owe them. We owe them not only for their support, but to even help them write their Declaration of Independence.
But write it right.
Yes, yes.
And right the wrong.
That's true.
We have another question.
Hello, my name is Fiji. I go to Northwestern High School. My question is for Miss Caroline. And you said that Miss Washington would not be too happy if General Washington took a second term. Do you know her very well, and does she often share her thoughts and feelings with you?
Well, yes. I'm in her room. I get in her room about 5 in the morning or so as the sun is rising, and I spend my whole day with her for the most part. And so, yes, I know what she's thinking, and I can tell when she's upset as well, because what happens is she often becomes ill when she gets upset, and she's not been feeling very well these days with the general thinking about taking a new term. Because as a wife, you know, being in the first lady of the new United States, I think she got worn out because almost every night they had an occasion, and she had to be dressed and ready to go and meet all these dignitaries and constantly taking visitors and having dinners, and she just wants her husband to herself. You know, I don't think they've had a meal alone since he became president, and she wants to have time here at Mount Vernon with her husband and her grandchildren.
Have any of you taken upon yourselves to mention to the general or to Mrs. Washington or Mr. Jefferson that you think that there should be freedom for the enslaved communities?
Every chance I get.
Do you actually say that?
In truth, yes. And of course, in private. You know, certainly I would not speak to him of such matters in a public like this, but certainly, yes. We have talked about this, and he feels that to have all Negroes free would be a grand idea, but that would also require a grand scheme. Again, for knowledge, for understanding, to have children to be free, but to not be in the same circumstances of white children, to have learning, to have understanding, to have knowledge, to be able to provide for themselves, without would be a detriment for all involved. Of course, he has yet to do anything that would make me think that the sentiments that he has are something that he feels is valid.
All right.
Well, my General Washington and I would have a talk. The general never said much to me about freeing slaves or the Negro, but I saw in his eye, when you got a musket ball whizzing past your ear, and you seen them boys from Rhode Island, Negro soldiers marching in the snow. When you serve with a man, you get to eat with him and lie with him, you know him. And when you know him, ain't no way you can keep him underfoot. So I figure while my General Washington ain't said much about it, I believe his heart is in the right place.
We have time for one more question. Yes.
Hi, my name is Courtney from West Springfield, and my question is for you, Billy. I was just wondering, and I don't mean any offense, but why are you no longer the general's manservant?
Ooh.
Well, you know, I don't have no problem telling my age. I've seen a lot. I'm past 40 tobacco seasons, you see. And I had a little occasion to a fall on my knee, you see. And it don't work so fine as it used to work. So you can't get upon a horse and ride. If you're a waiting man, most of your job is standing around and waiting. So you can't stand around like it's such. So Christopher there, he's able-bodied, ain't he? He knows how to dress a man and ride a horse. And I take the collar of my shoes, but every time somebody come to Mount Vernon, they come to see old Billy. Don't care who it is. Well, except Mr. Jefferson.
Do we know why?
So Billy, you have a tremendous amount of status.
Well, one could say status, man, but what it is for me is that I rode with the general. I've been in the war. I done seen near every part of this country.
But when dignitaries come, they come to see you specifically.
Well, indeed, because I know the stories. I know the stories about when we was there at Mama's. I know what happened in New York. I know what happened in Cambridge when we first set up shop there. You know, he ride through and take them boys from New England and them boys from Virginia. I knows all that. Well, I was even there when General sat down and penned a letter to the young poet Phyllis Wheatley. I was there. That's why they come to see me, because I know the stories.
So, Christopher, taking Billy's place, you really can't take his place. Is it you're doing his position?
Well,
how's that for you?
as I said, every frog is going to praise his own lily pad. I think I'm doing a right fine job for the general.
Indeed you are.
And Billy has taught me many ways of doing things a little bit easier than I probably would have done before. So I have a lot of respect for Billy. And I've seen the general change when he came from the war. Change man. And I'm with Billy on this. When you see men fighting upon the battlefield, black, white, Indian, dying and shedding their blood, when you come back from war, I guess color really doesn't really matter. I believe is what's in your heart. Soldiers fighting beside one another, they don't care what color you are. You want to make sure you win the war, or win the battle. And I believe that this battle, even with slavery, I think he's going to make some kind of statement. I don't know what it is, but I believe he's going to make some kind of statement about this slavery.
Well, I think it's time to go to the year 2011. So I want to thank, please stay seated, everybody, but I'd like to thank Billy Lee for being here. Onie Judd. Bob Hemings, Mr. Jefferson's manservant. Caroline, Mrs. Washington's handmaid. And Christopher Shields, General Washington's manservant. And the 2011 version of our actor-interpreters is, I would like to give you them. Billy Lee is known this year by Larry Earl, the actor-interpreter. Bob is Richard Josie. Thank you. Onie is Hope Smith. Caroline is Azania Dungy. Thank you. And Christopher is James Ingram. Now that we've come back to this year, could you tell us what happened to your characters? Billy, what happened? What happened to Billy?
Lee continues out serving as the sort of shoot and boom maker here at Mount Vernon. And in General Washington's will, his last will and testament when he died, Billy is the only slave that he frees immediately upon his death, and provides for him a pension, so to speak, and says that he can live out the rest of his life here at Mount Vernon or wherever he shall wish to go. But he continues on here at Mount Vernon.
And could you tell us, Hope, what happened to Onie?
Well, Onie, going back and forth with the Washingtons during their time in New York and Philadelphia, becomes aware that if you stay in Philadelphia for 6 months, you become free. And Washington begins to send slaves out of Philadelphia at about the 5 months mark. So before they take the voyage to return to Virginia for the last time, at the end of Washington's second term, she escapes. And we don't know how she did it, which goes to show how successful it was, because you wouldn't know the details of it, but ends up in New Hampshire, marries a man named John Harris. They have 2 children, and that's how she gets her freedom.
Did the Washington family pursue you?
Relentlessly. Relentlessly, they did. There were schemes to kidnap her. There was even overtures that if you return, that you'll eventually get your freedom, that Washington planned to free his slaves at his wife's death. But she didn't want to wait. She wanted her freedom when she wanted her freedom.
And Richard, what happened with Bob Hemings?
2 years after this time frame, Bob Hemings is a free man. And what's happening is, as Jefferson's going back up north, to serve, under Washington, Bob doesn't stay. Bob decides to come back, probably because his wife Dolly is here, and in Virginia, and Bob starts to hire himself out as a servant for other people. He works for other people, meriting wages, saving those wages, and he has a gentleman that he comes across who actually pays Jefferson for Bob to purchase Bob, and then Bob pays that man and acquires his freedom. So on December 24th, 1794, Bob has his manumission papers. To Christmas Eve, he becomes a free man.
All right. Azania, what happened to Caroline?
Well, Caroline is not owned by General Washington. She's owned by the dowry, the estate of the Custis's, who is Mrs. Washington's first husband. So she's not a part of the slaves that would be freed upon Mrs. Washington or General Washington's death. So she, along with all the other slaves like herself and her children, are split amongst Mrs. Washington's grandchildren. She eventually trades the freedom of one of her grandsons for giving a story to a writer of General Washington's death. Mrs. Washington's grandson gives Caroline's grandson his freedom because she told the story of General Washington's death for a writer, but she herself never attains freedom.
And one of her grandchildren.
One of her, yes.
All right, thank you. And James, what happened with Christopher?
Well, Christopher is in the same situation as Caroline. He's not owned by General Washington, but by the dowry. And so he doesn't see freedom. In fact, he's there at the deathbed of General Washington. When he dies, he stands. As a matter of fact, the general asks Christopher to sit down, because he was standing so long there. But he sees his death, but he will not see freedom. And he's not married. He had a young lady that he wanted to marry, but the Washingtons did not approve of this young lady because she spoke of running away. And so, unfortunately, he will not see freedom.
All right. We're almost out of time, but can you just give us an idea of what's it like to portray a person in an enslaved community?
It's an honor.
It looks like you really enjoy.
Well, it's an honor because you're giving a voice to the people that did not have a necessary voice in society. You're giving them a face, a voice. And we do all we can to try to honor these people by not only researching their lives, but also making sure that whatever we do it with very much caution, because we want to make sure that it is an honor and it's not a dishonor. Yes.
Well, thank you very much for being here.
Thank you.
All right, and we'd also like to thank the audience for being here today and thank the viewers for watching this program. Good night.